How did this story begin? Not with a scream, but with a toast. The sound of crystal at Chicago's most luxurious restaurant, right before my world shattered. My husband, the man I built an empire with, raised his glass not to me, but to her. Have you ever felt the air sucked out of a room? I did, as hundreds of eyes, partners and investors, turned to me with cold calculation. They thought this was an ending. They did not realize this is where I began. My name is Ilara Vance. For 10 years, I was the COO of Vance Innovations, the silent engine that made the impossible happen. Tonight was my masterpiece, our 10th wedding anniversary, and the 10-year anniversary of the company we built from nothing. The restaurant, the apex, floated over Chicago, a jewel box of glass and steel. I had curated every detail, from the ice sculptures reflecting the skyline to the precise shade of cobalt blue in the napkins. The air hummed with the quiet, expensive sound of power. Our entire board, our most critical investors, the titans of Chicago's tech scene. They were all here. I had brought them here. My husband, Julian Vance, moved through the room. At 45, he was more than handsome. He was a force of nature. He was the sun, and everyone else, including me, was expected to be a planet in his orbit. He was the charismatic CEO, the visionary. I was the operator, the one who turned his visions into logistics, profit, and reality. He tapped a knife against his champagne flute. The room fell into a respectful hush. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice wrapping around the room like velvet. 10 years, an entire decade. He smiled, that brilliant, camera-ready smile, and he looked right at me. "Ilara, my partner. We did it." I smiled back, the practiced, supportive smile of the corporate wife. My heart swelled with a foolish, genuine pride. We had done it. "But a company," he continued, "like a life, cannot survive by looking backward. It must look forward. We must embrace change. We must have vision." He paused, a signature Julian move, letting the anticipation build. "And so, at our anniversary dinner, I want to say, this night belongs to someone else." The silence was absolute. It was a cold, sudden vacuum. I felt my smile tighten at the edges. My blood felt thick and slow. It was a bizarre, clumsy joke, perhaps a prelude to introducing a new charity initiative or honoring a key client. I kept smiling. The first rule of being Mrs. Vance was to always keep smiling. Julian did not look at me. He turned, his glass held high, toward the far end of the long table. "This night," he announced, his voice ringing with false sincerity, "belongs to Isabella, who represents the bold, new future of Vance Innovations." My gaze followed his. Isabella, 30 years old, our vice president of strategy, hired only 6 months ago. She was sharp, I'll give her that. She met Julian's gaze with a cool confidence that now looked chillingly familiar. Julian beamed. "To that end, I am thrilled to announce that effective immediately, Isabella will be taking over as the new Chief Executive Officer of Vance Innovations." The air left my lungs. The room tilted. "As for me," he added, a model of false modesty, "I will be transitioning to my new role as chairman of the board." And then, the sound, the applause. It wasn't the hesitant, confused, polite clapping I might have expected. It was crisp. It was assured. It was unanimous. I looked around the table, from Mr. Harrison, our lead investor, to Sarah Millington, who sat on our compensation committee. Their faces were not shocked. They were composed, watchful, and complicit. They were all looking at me, waiting to see how I would take the blade. They knew. Every single one of them knew. This entire event, this celebration I had planned down to the last perfect detail, was a stage. My anniversary party was my public execution. I was not a partner. I was not the COO. I was a prop. a piece of old furniture being replaced by a newer, sleeker model. This was not a business decision. This was a coup, and I was the only person in the room who hadn't been invited to the plotting. My feet moved before my mind did. The applause was still ringing in my ears, a deafening wave of betrayal as I walked straight past the table and pushed through the heavy oak door to the private dining room we had reserved. Julian followed me. The click of the lock behind him sounded like a cell door slamming shut. "Explain," I said. My voice was low, shaking with a cold I had not felt from the 100-story view. "Explain what, Ilara?" He was already loosening his tie, the public charm vanishing like a mask being dropped. All that remained was a chilling exhaustion, a weariness I now realized was not of me, but with me. The announcement. The ambush. "It was not an ambush. It was a transition," he said, slumping into a chair. "Ilara, you are too careful. You are meticulous. You are brilliant, but you are an anchor. The company needs to move fast. It needs a sail. Isabella is the sail." "A sail. She has been here 6 months. Julian, I built the entire operational framework. I own 20% of this company." The door opened again. It was not a waiter. It was Arthur Vance, Julian's father, 70 years old, with eyes that had seen and approved of corporate slaughters for decades. He was the real power, the patriarch who pulled the strings. "This was a board decision, Ilara," Arthur said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "It was unanimous. You cannot. My shares." Arthur actually chuckled. It was a dry, rasping sound. "Read your terms, my dear. You always were so good at the details. I am surprised you missed this one. Your shares are contingent upon your executive status. Now that your employment is terminated, you are required to sell them back to the board." "At what price?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "At the predetermined book value," Arthur finished, smiling, a value they had likely spent the last 6 months manipulating downward. Julian avoided my gaze. He reached under the table and pulled out a small, brown cardboard box. He pushed it across the polished mahogany. It skidded and stopped right in front of me. "Your personals," he said, his voice flat. "Security cleared your office." I stared at it. 10 years of my life, the late nights, the weekends I sacrificed, the strategies I developed, reduced to a box that might hold office supplies. My hands were trembling as I opened the flaps. Inside, on top of a framed photo of us in Santorini, a photo taken when I still believed in us, was my desk stapler, a pen, and a single shining key, my penthouse key, the key to our home. I looked up at him, confused. "I changed the locks," Julian said, finally meeting my eyes. His were cold, devoid of the man I married. "Company security protocol. Of course. The penthouse is a corporate asset. We cannot have a disgruntled former employee with access." It hit me. All of it. The precision, the timing, the months of planning, the feigned arguments over the guest list for this party, the insistence that this restaurant, the Apex, was the only place to celebrate. They had not just decided this, they had orchestrated it. My 10th anniversary dinner was the final act of my public neutralization. They needed witnesses. They needed to show the world, our world, that I was finished. 2 men entered the room. I recognized them. I had hired them, Frank and Thomas, from our executive security detail. They stood on either side of me, not touching, but their presence was a clear, unspoken order. "This way, Mrs. Vance," Frank said, his face impassive. They did not lead me back through the main hall. Of course not. They led me through the service corridor, past the gleaming stainless steel kitchen, past the clatter of dishes and the smell of reductions. I could hear the party on the other side of the wall, the laughter, the music, another round of champagne being poured for the new CEO. The emergency exit slammed open, spilling the noise of the kitchen into the night. And then, silence. I was standing in a dark alley in downtown Chicago. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. The cold air hit my bare shoulders, a stark contrast to the warmth of the party. I was still wearing a $2,000 silk gown, holding a cardboard box. The smell of garbage bins and old rainwater filled my lungs. Above, I could just see the glittering pinnacle of the apex where my husband was toasting my replacement. The alley was a canyon of brick and stench. I walked, my heels echoing on the wet pavement, until I reached the street. The traffic lights blurred. Shock is a cold, heavy blanket. I managed to flag a taxi, the driver giving my evening gown and the cardboard box a strange look. I gave him the address of my private bank. I needed money. I needed a hotel room. I needed to think. The bank's private client entrance was all quiet marble and expensive art. Mr. Harris, the manager who had sent me a case of Dom Perignon for my 40th birthday, saw me and his professional smile faltered. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice a half octave too high. "We were not expecting you this evening. I need to make a substantial withdrawal. Harris, cash," I said, my voice sounding brittle, unfamiliar. I slid my black titanium card across his polished desk. He did not touch the card. He looked at his monitor, then at me, then back at his monitor. "There appears to be a problem, Mrs. Vance." "A problem? What kind of problem?" He cleared his throat, a nervous, papery sound. "The Vance Alara joint account has been frozen. We received an emergency corporate order less than an hour ago. It cites potential liabilities, pending a full audit. Potential liabilities." The words were absurd. I was the audit. I was the one who signed off on every quarterly report. "That is impossible." "It is effective immediately. I am so sorry." My hands are tied. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my voice iron. "Fine. Then I will access my personal account, the one in my name only, the one I have had since before I was married." Harris typed again. The color drained from his face. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a sickening pity. "Alara, the balance is $12.40. The room spun. "What? That is impossible. That account holds over $700,000. "There was a wire transfer initiated 3 weeks ago," he said, lowering his voice. "It moved the full balance into the joint account. The authorization. It has your signature." 3 weeks ago. He had been planning this for weeks. He had drained my personal safety net while I was busy planning our anniversary party. That signature. It must have been in the stack of quarterly papers he asked me to sign last month, the ones he said were urgent. I walked out of the bank. The city noise felt deafening. I sat on a concrete planter, the cold seeping through the thin silk of my gown. The cardboard box sat on my lap like an insult. My phone. I still had my phone. I dialed Michael, my lawyer, our lawyer, the man I had on retainer for 10 years, straight to voicemail. I tried his mobile. Voicemail. A moment later, an email notification lit up my screen. It was not from Michael. It was from the managing partner of his firm. "Dear Mrs. Vance, we regret to inform you that a conflict of interest has arisen. As we represent the interests of Vance Innovations, we are unable to represent you in any matter, personal or professional, moving forward." They had cut me off. They had chosen the corporation. They had chosen him. My fingers were shaking, but I kept dialing. Sarah Millington, a board member. We had lunch last week, laughing about her son's college applications. Voicemail. Robert Harrison, our biggest investor. He always said I was the only reason the company was stable. Voicemail. I tried 3 more. Every single one, straight to the recorded greeting. It was not a coincidence. It was a purge. I was standing on a Chicago street in a gown, with no home, no money, no legal counsel, and not a single ally. They had built an invisible wall around my entire life, and it had been built in plain sight. I had nowhere to go. No hotel would take me without a card. No friend would answer my call. Julian and Arthur knew every person I trusted. They had accounted for everything, except for one. My mind raced back, past the luxury, past the IPO, past Julian. It landed on Evelyn Reed, my mentor. The woman who had actually founded this company, the true genius behind the logistics technology, the woman who had died 5 years ago, leaving her controlling interest split between me and Julian, the protege and the predator. Evelyn had a brother, an artist, an outcast she had supported but who had detested the corporate world. The Vances despised him. They never, ever thought of him. Marcus Reed. He was the only person left in this city they could not control. I must have had some cash in my clutch. I fumbled with the beaded clasp, the bag I had chosen hours ago because it matched my shoes. Inside, past the lipstick and the phone, my fingers brushed against paper. 3 $20 bills and a 10. $70. It felt like the last $70 on earth. It was enough to get across town. I hailed another taxi, this one smelling of stale cigarette smoke and cheap air freshener, a universe away from the black cars I was used to. I gave the driver the address in Pilsen, an old industrial arts district I had not set foot in since before the IPO. The taxi left me on a dark, cobbled street. The warehouse was a brick monolith, its windows dark or boarded. A single battered metal door, painted a peeling, ugly green, had a small buzzer next to it. I pressed it, the cold metal shocking my finger. I stood there, a ghost in a silk gown, clutching a cardboard box on a deserted street. The wind was picking up, and I was freezing. A loud, abrasive buzz cracked the silence, and the door clicked open. I pushed my way inside, into an atmosphere thick with the smell of turpentine, linseed oil, and old dust. The contrast to the apex was violent. This place was not sleek, it was real. The space was cavernous, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Massive canvases, covered in what looked like angry explosions of color, were everywhere. From the shadows, a man emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. He was thin, perhaps 60, with a wild mane of gray hair and eyes that were fiercely intelligent and deeply suspicious. "What?" he demanded, his voice a rasp. "Marcus Reed. Who is asking?" His eyes raked over me, taking in the designer dress, the heels, the remnants of my glamorous evening. "You look like one of them." "My name is Ilara Vance." The name tasted like ash in my mouth. "I was Evelyn's. I worked with Evelyn Reed." "Vance." He spat the name, as if it were a physical offense. "I know who you are. You are the one who married the suit. Evelyn's protege who joined the Snakes." He turned his back on me, gesturing toward the door. "Get out of my studio. I have nothing to say to a Vance." "Please." My voice broke, the cold and the shock finally shattering my composure. "They threw me out. Julian, Arthur, tonight, at our anniversary party." I held up the box as evidence. "This is all I have. They locked me out of my home. They froze my accounts. I have $70 in this dress. I have nowhere else to go." Marcus stopped. He turned back slowly, his gaze forensic, searching my face for the lie. He saw none. The anger in his eyes did not vanish, but it was joined by a look of weary, ancient recognition. "Tonight, you said, an hour ago." He let out a long, slow breath, a puff of cynical air. "Well, sit down, Mrs. Vance. It looks like you finally see them clearly. Evelyn always said Julian had his father's eyes, the eyes of a collector, someone who sees things not for what they are, but for what they are worth. He collected Evelyn's company, and then he collected you." I explained it all, the words tumbling out of me, the toast, the humiliation, Isabella, the box, the locked penthouse, the empty bank accounts, the lawyers who had abandoned me. He paced in front of a giant, terrifying canvas as he listened. He was not surprised. But why? Marcus, why so brutal? I asked, my voice small. Why the public execution? They did not just want to fire me. They wanted to destroy me. They wanted me erased. Of course they did, he said, stopping his pacing. You misunderstand what is happening. Alara, this is not about running the company. This is about selling it. I shook my head. No, that is impossible. We cannot. Oh, but they want to. Arthur has wanted to for years. A big payday. Cash out, walk away, let some overseas conglomerate strip it for parts. But the legacy clause, I insisted, the words feeling hollow. Evelyn and I drafted it together. It is ironclad. No sale to a major competitor for 20 years. Evelyn wanted it to remain independent. Marcus smiled, a bitter, painful expression. You are still thinking like an operator. They are thinking like thieves. What is the one exception to that clause? My blood ran cold. I knew the words I had written myself. Unless the company sustains catastrophic losses for 3 consecutive quarters. Exactly, Marcus said. And what was the one thing stopping that? Me, I whispered. I was too good. I kept the margins high. I kept us profitable, even when Julian was pushing for those insane vanity projects. You, Marcus confirmed. They could not sell the company with you at the helm. You kept it healthy. They needed you gone, and they needed you discredited, so that when the losses start piling up next quarter, everyone will blame the transition. They will blame you. They are going to intentionally sabotage their own company, drive it into the ground, trigger the exception clause, and sell the smoking crater for scraps. Billions of scraps. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was monstrous. It was brilliant. They were not just taking my job or my home. They were murdering Evelyn's legacy. They are burning her whole life's work down for cash, I said, the scale of the betrayal settling on me like cement. My sister knew this day would come, Marcus said, walking over to an old fireproof filing cabinet. She knew Julian. She knew Arthur. She trusted you. She hoped you would be strong enough when the time came. He fumbled with a key, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small, velvet-covered box. She left this for you, not for Mrs. Vance, for Alara. He opened the small velvet box. Inside, resting on faded satin, was not a jewel, but a single, ornate, old-fashioned skeleton key. It was heavy, made of brass. She kept a box, Marcus said, his voice softer now. At an old bank downtown, one of those places with real vaults, not just numbers on a screen. It is in her name, but she listed you as the sole beneficiary. She set it up the month before she died. My fingers closed around the cold metal. It felt like a link to the past, a hand reaching out from the grave. Marcus gave me a long, dark wool coat, a painter's coat that smelled of him, of oil paints and dust. It swallowed my silk gown, a welcome shroud of armor. He gave me the last of his cash, another $40 for a taxi. I felt like a spy in my own life. The bank was a pre-war fortress of granite and marble. The security guard eyed my strange appearance, a disheveled woman in a man's coat with an evening gown peeking out at the hem, but the key and my driver's license were all that mattered. A bank attendant, an elderly man who seemed to move in slow motion, led me into the vault. The air was cold, still, and smelled of paper and time. He located the box. It was long, thin, and heavy. He placed it on a small private table and left me, closing the curtain. My heart was pounding. Was it money? A new identity documents. I unlocked the box. Inside, there was no cash, no jewelry, just a single object nestled on black velvet. It was a brooch, an absurdly large, vintage-style brooch, a mess of silver and Art Deco-style jade. I recognized it. Evelyn had worn it to the IPO celebration. She had joked it was her good luck charm, but I knew what it really was. I had helped her design it. I picked it up. It was heavy. Too heavy for a simple pin. I found the hidden seam, the same one I had helped engineer. The jade slid back, revealing not a clasp, but a custom, high-speed USB port. It was a bespoke encrypted hard drive. I rushed back to the warehouse, clutching the drive in my pocket. The coat felt like a shield. "It is not money," I said, bursting back into the studio. "It is this." I showed Marcus. He just stared at it. "A pin. A drive," I said, my fingers fumbling to plug it into his ancient, dust-covered desktop computer. The machine whirred to life. The drive icon appeared. We clicked it. A password screen slammed onto the monitor. Not just one, but two. "Damn it," I whispered. I knew this protocol. I had designed it with David, our IT director. It was a dual encryption key, one password held by the user, one held by the administrator. Evelyn was the user. David was the administrator. Without both keys, the drive was just a piece of metal. It would wipe itself after 3 failed attempts. "I cannot open it," I said, the hope draining out of me as quickly as it had come. "I need David. He is the only other one with the access keys." "David," Marcus asked. "Can you trust him?" I think so," I said. But for the first time, I was not sure of anything. He was the last person left. I was about to unplug the drive when I saw it. Behind the password prompt, on the drive's root directory, was one single file. It was outside the encryption wall, an outlier. Its name was simple README, M4A, an audio file. My hand was shaking as I double-clicked it. The speakers hissed, and then I heard her. It was Evelyn, but not the strong, confident voice I remembered. This was a weak, thin, reedy version of her, a voice laced with fear and fatigue. The recording was dated 1 week before her death. Arthur came by again. Evelyn's voice rasped. He thinks I am getting senile. He was talking about Project Chimera again, demanding I sign over the R&D budget. He thinks I do not know what he is doing. He thinks I do not see the transfers." A pause, a shaky breath. "Julian. Oh, God, Julian is helping him. He is in on it. They are gutting it. Ilara. From the inside. They are hollowing it out. Whatever you do not trust the books, the real numbers. The real numbers are. Find Chimera." The audio file ended. I sat back, stunned. Project Chimera. It was not a fiction. It was a phantom. An R&D black box project Julian and Arthur had pitched 2 years ago. An internal skunkworks to develop next-generation tech. I had questioned the burn rate, the lack of results, but Julian had been insistent. He had charmed the board. I had been the one to sign the authorizations. Millions. I had personally approved millions of dollars to be poured into it, quarter after quarter. This drive was not just a warning. Evelyn had left me a parallel ledger. She had left me the truth. I had to get to David. He was the only one left. He was the co-administrator of Evelyn's drive, the keeper of the second key. More than that, he was a good man, or at least I had always believed him to be. He had been with the company since before the Vances. He was loyal to Evelyn. I used a payphone outside a convenience store, the receiver cold and smelling of stale plastic. I dialed his direct line at the office, a number few people had. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight. "Hello, it is me," I said, my voice low. "David, I need your help." A sharp intake of breath. "Ilara, oh, God, you cannot call here. They are monitoring everything." "Meet me," I said, my mind racing. I needed somewhere public, noisy, with lots of exits. "The Shed Aquarium, by the main oceanarium tank." 1 hour. I hung up before he could argue. I arrived first. The humidity and the dark, quiet atmosphere of the aquarium a strange comfort. The deep blue light of the main tank cast flickering shadows over the faces of families and tourists. I blended in, just another face in the crowd, my borrowed coat making me anonymous. David appeared exactly 1 hour later. I almost did not recognize him. He looked like he had aged 10 years since I last saw him a week ago. His face was gray, his eyes bloodshot and constantly moving, scanning every face in the crowd. He saw me and walked slowly, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He stood beside me, both of us staring at the silent glide of a beluga whale. "You look terrible, David," I said softly. "You should not have come," he whispered, his voice shaking. "They are watching everyone, me, my family, my keystrokes. David, I have Evelyn's drive, the brooch. I need your admin key. They are destroying her. David. They are destroying everything she built. It is all about something called Project Chimera." David flinched, a violent physical reaction that made a nearby child look at him. He gripped the metal railing of the exhibit so hard his knuckles turned white. "You do not understand, Ilara. You have to get out of the city. You have to disappear." "What are you talking about? Help me unlock it. We can expose them." "No," he said, turning to face me, his eyes wide with terror. "They came to me, a month ago, Julian and Arthur, in my office. They closed the door." My stomach tightened. What did they want? They asked about Evelyn, about her private backups. They asked about the brooch. They knew. Ilara. They knew she had a failsafe. This was worse than I thought. "What did you tell them?" "I lied," he said, his voice cracking. "I told them I did not know anything, but they were prepared." He swallowed, a painful, dry sound. "They told me you were under investigation. They said you were embezzling, using a hidden project to siphon money. They showed me logs. Ilara. They were fabrications, but they looked real. They said they needed my help to track you, to protect the company. They said you were the threat." The sickness rose in my throat. They were painting me as the criminal, using their own crime as the brush. "And you believed them." He looked away, back at the glass. I tried to access the drive for them, from my terminal. I told them I would see what I could find. I used my key, thinking I could see what you were doing. But it did not work," I said, realizing. "It did not just not work," he hissed. "It was a trap. Evelyn's trap. The moment I entered my admin key without her user key present, it must have triggered a silent alarm, a dead man's switch. It sent an alert. I do not know where, but they knew. Within an hour, they were back in my office. They knew I had tried, and they knew I had failed. And now, Ilara, now they know the drive is active, and since I do not have it, they know you do." The air became thin. They were not just firing me. They were hunting me. David fumbled in his pocket, his hand shaking violently. He pressed a small, plastic-wrapped burner phone into my hand. "Take this. It is clean. Throw yours into the lake." "David, why?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you help them? Why did you try to access it for them?" He would not look at me. He was staring at a shark circling in the deep. "They promoted me," he said, the words heavy and dead. "Full director. They tripled my salary. Ilara." He finally turned to me, his eyes brimming with a desperate, shameful plea. "My wife. Her cancer is back. The experimental treatments. The medical bills. I had no choice. It was the final devastating blow. The last piece of loyalty I had counted on, the last good man, shattered by the oldest, cruelest leverage. They knew his weakness. They knew exactly where to aim the knife. "Go," he said, pushing me slightly. "Get out of here. Now." I turned and walked quickly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I did not look back. I pushed through the heavy glass doors, out of the dark blue and into the sharp, cold sunlight. As I reached the sidewalk, a black sedan pulled up to the curb half a block down. Two men in dark suits got out. They were not looking at the museum entrance. They were looking at me. They had been waiting. The meeting was a trap. David's confession. The phone. His fear, it was all real. But they had followed him. They had used his desperation to pinpoint my location. I turned and ran, disappearing into the lunchtime crowd on the street. They were not just trying to silence me. They were not just trying to discredit me. They knew I had the ledger. They wanted Evelyn's key. And they would tear the city apart to get it. I did not go back to the street. I ran. I slipped out a side door of the aquarium, moved with the flow of tourists, and jumped onto the L train just as the doors were closing. I switched lines twice, my mind racing faster than the rattling car. David was compromised. The phone he gave me was useless, a tracking device. I threw it from the walkway into the Chicago River and watched it disappear. They were not just watching me, they were actively hunting. I burst back into Marcus's studio, my breath ragged, my borrowed coat slick with rain. They were there, I gasped, bolting the heavy metal door. They were waiting for me. David is compromised. They are paying his wife's medical bills. They set a trap, and I walked right into it. They know I have the drive. Marcus. He looked at the brooch, which I still clutched in my hand. So it is useless. A locked box with no key. No, I said, the panic starting to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. David was the loyal option, but loyalty can be bought. It can be leveraged. I was thinking like an executive. I looked up at him. We do not need someone they can buy. We need someone they have already tried to destroy. We need someone who hates them just as much as we do. The name came to me from the ghosts of Vance Innovations past. Chloe Takeda. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The blogger, the one Arthur Vance sued into oblivion. Exactly, I said. About 7 years ago, she wrote a series of articles connecting Arthur's holding companies to offshore fraud. He buried her, sued her personally, not just her publication, bankrupted her, got her blacklisted. She lost everything. And you think she will help you? You are one of them. I am not anymore, I said. And she did not just write about finance. She was a digital forensics analyst. She is the best hacker I have ever heard of. If anyone can get into this drive, it is her. I found her in a cramped, overheated office above a 24-hour diner. The sign on the door just said, Takeda Digital Forensics. The room smelled of burnt coffee and hot electronics, packed with servers and tangled wires. Chloe looked up from a bank of 3 monitors, her eyes shadowed with fatigue. She recognized me instantly, and her expression curdled into one of pure, unadulterated contempt. Well, if it is not Alara Vance, she said, her voice like gravel. What is wrong? Your penthouse too cold, or did you come down here to serve me with another lawsuit? I walked straight to her desk, ignoring the chair. They took it all, I said. Julian and Arthur. Last night. My job, my money, my home. They framed me for fraud, and they are trying to find me. They want this. I took the brooch from my pocket and placed it on her desk between a keyboard and a pile of gutted smartphones. She stared at it. A gaudy pin. Congratulations. It is a custom encrypted hard drive. I said. It belonged to Evelyn Reed. It has the truth about a ghost project called Project Chimera, the one they are using to frame me. But it is locked. Dual key encryption. I cannot get in. Chloe leaned back in her chair, a cruel, satisfied smile playing on her lips. So the queen is locked out of her own castle, and she comes to the peasant she watched them burn at the stake. Get out of my office. Vance, I would not touch anything related to your family with a 10-foot pole. I learned my lesson. They do not just win, they annihilate. They are annihilating me right now, I said, my voice low and steady. I do not care about my job. I do not care about the money. This is Evelyn's drive. They are destroying her company. And they used me to help them do it. I pushed the brooch closer. This is not just a story. This is the complete ledger. This is proof. This is the weapon that takes them down. You help me open this, Chloe, and you get the story of the century. You get Arthur. Her eyes, cold and cynical, flickered. I saw it, the buried hunger, the desire for the one thing they could not take from her vindication. She was silent for a long moment. Then, she pulled a set of precision tools toward her. Move, you are in my light. She did not work like David. She did not try to use the software. She attacked the hardware. She pried the casing open, exposed the chip, and began soldering microwires directly from the controller to her own rig. She worked with a focused, brilliant rage. Hours bled into one another. The city outside went from dark to gray to a pale, watery dawn. Marcus appeared at some point, a silent guardian at the door, holding a bag of stale coffee. At almost 5 a.m, Chloe sat back. I am in, she whispered. I bypassed the primary encryption. I am in the directory. The screen filled with folders, not just a few files, but thousands. Encrypted spreadsheets, offshore banking records, scanned contracts. Project Chimera, she muttered, her fingers flying across the keyboard, decrypting the first file. Here it is, a shell corporation, registered in the Cayman Islands, sole beneficiary owners. Julian Vance and Arthur Vance. Standard stuff. I knew it, I said. But this is not, she said, opening a second file. It was a transaction log, a wire transfer for $2 million, from Chimera to a bank in Singapore, to an account held by Talon Dynamics. My blood stopped. Talon Dynamics, Chloe. That is impossible. That is our largest overseas competitor. The one Julian was always saying we had to raise R&D funds to fight. He was not fighting them. Alara, Chloe said, her voice dangerously quiet as she opened a third file. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a set of highly detailed technical schematics. I recognized the design. It was our proprietary Pathfinder routing algorithm. The absolute core of Vance Innovations, the patent that made us worth billions. This schematic, Chloe said, checking the timestamp, was transferred to Talon Dynamics 5 years ago. The room tilted. It was not a new plan. It was not just about selling the company next quarter. All of it, I whispered, the horror rising in my throat. The massive R&D budgets, the secret projects I was never allowed to audit, the manufactured rivalry. It was all a lie. They were not just planning to sell the company. They have been selling it, piece by piece, from the inside out, for years. They have been stealing our own tech and selling it to our worst enemy, right under my nose. We were still staring at the screen, the magnitude of their 5-year heist settling over us like a shroud. When the door to Chloe's office flew open, Marcus stood there, his face ashen. He was clutching a copy of the morning's Chicago Tribune. They are not just hunting you, Ilara, he said, his voice a low tremor. They are branding you. He threw the paper onto Chloe's desk. The headline, in bold, unforgiving type, screamed from the front page, Former Vance Co. investigated for corporate espionage. My picture was beneath it, a professional headshot from my COO profile, the one I had approved 2 years ago. I looked so confident, so naive. I read the article, my hands feeling distant, numb. It was a masterpiece of deceit. It detailed a months-long internal investigation that had uncovered a shocking breach of fiduciary duty. It quoted an anonymous source, a high-level IT director, who had bravely come forward with evidence. David. The article claimed I had created Project Chimera as a personal slush fund. It claimed I had used it to methodically steal proprietary technology and sell it to foreign competitors. They were using their exact crime, their exact methodology, and pinning it on me. They had used David's fabricated testimony, backed by the falsified logs he mentioned, to build a perfect airtight case against me. The final paragraph was the kill shot. A spokesperson for the Chicago Police Department confirmed that a warrant had been issued for the arrest of Alara Vance on charges of wire fraud, aggravated corporate theft, and economic espionage. I was not just an outcast, I was a fugitive. "You have to run," Marcus said, his voice frantic. "They are using the police. This is not a game, Alara. They will find you. They will put you in a cage." I looked up from the paper, but I felt no fear. The shock had burned away, leaving something hard and cold in its place. "No," I said. "This is not strength. This is panic. They would not have done this, not so publicly, not so fast, if they were not terrified." I tapped the brooch, still connected to Chloe's rig. "They know we are in here. They know we are holding the truth. This is not an attack." "It is a desperate, sloppy countermove. They are just trying to make sure that when this drive comes out, nobody will believe us." "She is right," Chloe said, her eyes scanning her monitors. The story was everywhere, picked up by every major financial news outlet. "They are trying to poison the well, control the narrative." She clicked on a link, a different kind of story from a local tech blog. The tone was fawning, celebratory. "Vance Innovations unveils new leadership at Future Tech Summit." A photo dominated the article. It was Julian, his arms securely around Isabella's waist. They were at some industry breakfast, probably that very morning. They were smiling. Isabella looked radiant, confident, the perfect image of a bold new CEO. Julian looked like a proud, grieving husband, bravely moving forward. The hypocrisy, the sheer, calculated audacity of it, made me sick. "Look at her," I muttered. "She is wearing the crown." I moved to close the window, but then something caught my eye. A glint of light. "Wait," I said. "Chloe, zoom in on that photo, on her wrist." Chloe's mouse clicked, and the image expanded. The photo was high resolution. Isabella's hand was resting on Julian's arm, her smile bright, and on her wrist was a watch. It was not a new Apple Watch. It was not a subtle Cartier. It was a one-of-a-kind white gold Patek Philippe with a custom-made dark green jade face. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "Alara, what is it?" Marcus asked, seeing the look on my face. "That is Evelyn's watch," I whispered, my voice barely audible. That was her watch. She never, ever took it off. Her father gave it to her. It was the one piece of absurd vanity she allowed herself. She was wearing it in the office the day she had her stroke. I could not breathe. I was back in that horrible, sterile hospital room 5 years ago, Julian holding my hand, his face a mask of grief. "It was reported lost at the hospital," I said, the words coming out flat. "Dead," Julian told me. He said it must have been stolen by an orderly, or lost when they were moving her from the gurney. He said he was sorry, that he knew how much I knew she loved it. I looked at the picture again, at Isabella, smiling, wearing a dead woman's watch, given to her, no doubt, by my husband. "They did not just lose it," I said, looking from Marcus to Chloe. "They took it." This was not just corporate fraud. This was not just a betrayal. This was grave robbery. This was something darker, something fouler, and it changed everything. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaking, "that watch. Isabella is wearing Evelyn's watch." His head snapped toward me, his face pale. "That is impossible. I saw her that morning. Alara. She was wearing it. It was on her wrist when she was in the office. I remember because she was tapping it, telling me I was late for our coffee." "In the office," I repeated. The words hung in the air, dense and cold. Not the hospital. She was found in the office. My memory, sharp and precise, unspooled. The frantic call from Julian, his voice wrecked with panic. I found her, Elara. I went to her office to apologize after our fight. She was, oh God, she is on the floor. He said he called 911 immediately. She was found in her office after the stroke and then taken to the hospital, where she later died. And I remembered something else, a different lie. David, I said, turning to Chloe. When Evelyn died, I asked David for the security footage from that day. I do not know. I just wanted to see her, to know her last moments. And, Chloe asked, her fingers already back on the keyboard. He told me the servers for that wing had malfunctioned. A power surge. He said the footage for that entire week was corrupted, lost forever. Chloe's eyes, dark and assessing, met mine. He lied to you twice. Elara. Get it, I said, my voice a command. Get that footage. If David locked it, if he deleted it, you can find it. You can undelete it. I know you can. I am already in the deep archives, Chloe said, her voice dropping into a low, focused hum. He did not just delete it, he buried it. He fragmented the files and scattered them across 3 different servers, then overwrote the directory. He is good, but I am better. For another hour, the only sound was the furious, rhythmic tapping of keys. Marcus and I stood behind her, watching as she reassembled a digital ghost, file fragments, code libraries, data packets, and then a file appeared on her screen. Hallway, exec 14th AV. The date was from 5 years ago, the day Evelyn died. I have it, Chloe said. Playing it now. The footage was grainy, time-stamped in the upper corner. It showed the familiar carpeted hallway outside Evelyn's office. The angle was high, from a corner security mount. At 2:05 p.m., the elevator doors opened. Julian and Arthur appeared. They looked agitated. They walked into Evelyn's office. The door closed. This is the meeting, I whispered. The one she recorded on the drive. We watched. The clock ticked. At 2:50 p.m., exactly 45 minutes later, the door opened. Julian and Arthur walked out. They were angry. Arthur was talking, his face red, jabbing a finger toward Julian. They stalked to the elevator and disappeared. So he found her later, Marcus began. Wait, Chloe said, her finger hovering over the mouse. Look. At 3:02 p.m., 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened again. It was just Julian. He looked both ways down the empty hall, then walked quickly back to Evelyn's office. He did not knock. He used his keycard and slipped inside. My heart stopped. This was not in his story. The clock on the screen was a torture device. 3:04, 3:05. At 3:07 p.m., 5 agonizing minutes later, the door opened. Julian stepped out, his movements hurried, frantic. He was not looking at the hallway. He was looking at his right hand, shoving something small and metallic, something that glinted, just once, in the overhead light deep into his trouser pocket. He smoothed his suit jacket. He took a deep, steadying breath. Then he pulled his cell phone from his other pocket. He stood in the hallway, his back to Evelyn's open door, and we watched him dial 911. He was in there for 5 minutes, I said, my voice choking. He found her, and he waited. No, Chloe said, her voice hollow. She was opening another file from Evelyn's drive, a different folder, marked personal. He did not just wait. She opened a file. It was not a corporate ledger. It was a scanned PDF, Evelyn's private medical history. She had a stroke, I said, confused. She did not, Chloe said, scrolling. Look, Evelyn Reed, type 1 diabetes. Insulin-dependent, severe, she wore a pump. I read the symptoms of a stroke as described in the coroner's report. Slurred speech, disorientation, sudden collapse, loss of consciousness. Oh my God, Marcus whispered, his hand going to his mouth. "Those are not stroke symptoms," I said, the horrifying final piece sliding into place. "That is hypoglycemic shock. Her pump must have failed, or he did something to it." Julian had not found a woman who had suffered a stroke. He had found his mentor, his business partner, unconscious on the floor, dying from a severe diabetic crash. She was probably still alive. She needed an injection. She needed paramedics. And he did not call for them. He saw his opportunity. He saw her, helpless, and his first thought was to secure his position. He left her. He went to the elevator. He thought about it. And then he came back. He came back not to help her, but to rob her. He came back to steal the watch from her wrist and, he must have assumed, the hard drive from her desk, the one she had just told him she had. He came back to steal the evidence. He did not just let her die. He stood in the room, watching her die, and then he stole her watch. This was not a passive act. It was murder. Vance Innovations was hosting the Future Tech Summit. It was a global live stream, a massive, arrogant display of power. This was it, Isabella's official debut as CEO, and the final primping of the company before Julian and Arthur announced the sale to Talon Dynamics. The ballroom was packed. Cameras floated on booms. The industry's most powerful figures sat in the front rows, all of them here to witness the new Vance Innovations. Chloe was a ghost in their system. She had not just hacked the guest list, she had created a fully credentialed identity for me. Ilara Stone, Financial Times. I walked right past the security I had hired, my face hidden by a pair of severe glasses, my hair cut short and dyed a mousy brown. I looked nothing like the glamorous wife they had executed. I was invisible. I took a seat in the press row, near the front. Marcus was seated across the aisle, a quiet, grieving relative, the brother of the late founder. He was just a face in the crowd, the perfect witnesses. Julian spoke first, all charm and forward-thinking vision. Then Isabella took the stage. She was polished, articulate, and wearing the Patek Philippe on her wrist like a trophy. She outlined a bold, aggressive new strategy, one I recognized as a plan to accelerate losses while looking like innovation. Finally, the moderator opened the floor to questions. I stood up and walked to the microphone in the center aisle. I waited my turn. The man in front of me asked a softball question about market projections. Then it was my turn. The spotlight hit me. I looked directly at Julian. "Ilara Stone, Financial Times," I said. "Mr. Vance, a question about R&D. On stage." Julian's smile froze. I saw the flash of recognition, then pure, undiluted panic. His eyes darted to the side, signaling for security. 2 men in suits started moving toward me from the back of the room, but they were too slow. The mic was live. The cameras were rolling. Hundreds of people were watching. "Mr. Vance," I repeated, my voice clear and amplified. "Could you please explain the $200 million R&D budget for Project Chimera, and perhaps clarify for your investors why all of its associated intellectual property is registered to an obscure shell company in the Cayman Islands?" The room went utterly silent. You could hear the hum of the servers. Julian was paralyzed. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Slander," a voice boomed from the front row. "Arthur." He was on his feet, his face purple. "Security, remove this woman." I ignored him. I turned my head slightly, my gaze locking on the new CEO. "And a follow-up for you, Ms. Isabella." She looked terrified, a deer in the headlights. "Are you aware that the entire valuation of the company you are about to sell is based on a fraudulent, non-existent project? Or did you perhaps just not ask, were you too busy accepting gifts? Did you know?" I asked, my voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in. "That the beautiful watch on your wrist was taken from the body of a dying woman." That was the moment, the pivot. Isabella was ambitious. She was a collaborator, But she was not a killer. She looked at my face, then at the watch on her wrist, then at Julian, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. She realized she was the scapegoat, the public face they were putting on a 5-year criminal conspiracy. She was the one who would be holding the bag when the fraud collapsed. She lunged for the lectern microphone, shoving the moderator aside. I did not know, she yelled, her voice high and frantic. He told me. He told me the funds were legitimate. He said they were legacy costs from Evelyn's era. He told me the watch was a corporate gift. She was unraveling, live, in front of the entire world, desperately trying to save herself. He told me. He told me. She did not get to finish, because that is when Chloe made her move. The massive screen behind the stage, the one displaying the Future Tech Summit logo, suddenly flickered. It went black. And then, it lit up. It was not a logo. It was grainy security footage, the hallway outside Evelyn's office. The whole room watched, confused, as Julian and Arthur left. They watched, in stunned silence, as Julian returned, alone. They watched him slip inside. They watched him emerge 5 minutes later, stuffing the small, glinting object into his pocket before dialing 911. The screen flickered again. Now, it was bank transfers. Project Chimera to Talon Dynamics. Millions. The schematics for Pathfinder. The Cayman accounts bearing Julian's and Arthur's names. Julian was frozen, a statue of his own guilt. Arthur was trying to run, clambering over chairs, but the doors at the back of the ballroom were already opening. It was not security. It was the police, uniformed officers, led by 2 detectives in suits. Chloe and Marcus had made the call the second the live stream started, sending the complete, unassailable data package to the authorities. The cameras, still rolling, turned from the stage to the aisle. They captured everything. They captured Arthur struggling. They captured Julian Vance, the charismatic CEO, as the detectives walked onto the stage, took him by the arms, and placed him in handcuffs. I stood by the microphone, my heart pounding, but my hands perfectly still. I watched as they were led away, their empire of lies collapsing in real time, broadcast live to the world they tried to fool. I looked up at the screen, at the footage of Julian, the thief and the killer. Then I looked at Marcus, who was watching, tears streaming down his face. It was over. Evelyn's legacy was finally safe. Thank you for listening to my story. I would love to connect with you all, so please, comment below and let me know where you are listening from and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.